So perhaps you are frustrated. You tried the ketogenic diet, Mary, her friends, your friends, and all the people that you know have tried it. You're searching on the internet. You have weight loss resistance. You're not able to lose those extra pounds, or perhaps you're fatigued and you're exhausted, or your blood sugar isn't stable, or your health isn't at the level that you want it to be. So you tried keto. And to your chagrin, to your disappointment, it didn't work. It didn't keep you satiated, meaning you were still craving sugars. You still had fatigue. You didn't see the scale move. And you want to know why. You're searching on the internet. Why didn't keto work for me? That's what this video is about. My name is Dr. Joel Rosen. Make sure you subscribe to this channel because we have lots of information around why keto wouldn't work in your body, and more importantly, why your body is under stress, why you're fatigued, why you're not moving the needle. Today I want to give you four reasons that you're not aware of as to why keto didn't work for you. The first reason I would say is, number one, you did it wrong. You just did it wrong. It's not easy. It's not one of those things where you can go half-assed, excuse my language. It's not one of those things that you can go half-assed or dip your toe in the water and kind of see how it is, and I'll have my carbs and I'll have my fats and just kind of go more of a dirty keto type of diet. It's just not going to work for you. The other thing is that people are told that it's a high-fat, low-carb diet. And ultimately it is, but that doesn't mean you throw out all those healthy fibers, those healthy plant-based foods that are gonna help with your microbiome, gonna help with your flora, gonna help with your absorption, gonna help with your diet, breaking down of foods and being able to utilize those minerals and nutrients. Also, the other thing is that carbs are different for everybody, meaning you may have a higher carb threshold than someone else, and they may have a lower carb threshold than someone else, meaning you may require, it's not just a, hey, absolutely, you shouldn't be exceeding 20 grams of carbs per day. Sometimes, especially for women, when they're in the middle of their cycle or at the beginning of their cycle, it's a matter of cyclical ketogenic implementation, meaning you're gonna need more energy at different times of the day, different times of the week, different times of the month. And that's where you're gonna need a little more sophistication about how to go about doing the keto properly. Also, the other thing that I see that people do it wrong is that they have small meals more frequently, or small keto meals more frequently. And if you are doing that and you're exceeding your carb threshold, you're exceeding your protein threshold, which means those numbers that you go above will cause an insulin spike. And I want you to think about insulin is the kryptonite to ketones. So if you, pardon me, if you have a challenge with absolute amount of calories, absolute amount of carbs, absolute amount of proteins, the consistency of how many meals you're doing, are you having an eating window, are you exceeding that eating window, are you eating at it? There's so many things, suffice it to say, you didn't do it properly. And I find that's probably the number one thing. Number two is, along with number one, is you didn't track. I can't tell you how many people I talk to that I say, okay, well, what was your fasting glucose in the morning? Or what was your glucose after an hour after the meal, after 2 hours after a meal, after 3 hours after a meal? And those are very, very important numbers to know, because this will help you understand the difference between psychological cravings and physiological hunger. Psychological craving and physiological hunger. So what does that mean? That means that if your glucose is above 90, and I would even go as far as saying if it's above 80, and maybe even above 70, depending on if you're tracking your ketones. Meaning there are glucose machines. I'll post a link underneath here so that you can get one, which I would suggest that you do, even if you're not following a keto, but you're feeling exhausted, fatigued, don't know when to eat, get shaky, lightheaded, and jittery, or you crash after a meal, or you're not losing your weight, or you just don't have the energy you need. You can see that it's really, really important. The machine has the ability to not only measure your glucose, but it can also measure your ketone production. And that's really essential when making decisions about your physiological need for food. Meaning, if your ketones, they suggest that if you're above 0.5 millimoles per deciliter, you're entering into the ketogenic realm. You're in ketosis, meaning you're producing ketones, your body is being able to use a fuel of fat as your main supply, and you're in ketosis. And then I'll ask someone who's doing the keto diet that didn't work, hey, what were your ketones? And they look at me like I'm from Mars because they've never even did that. They may have tried the strips, the ketone strips that you can urinate on, but those are short term in terms of if you are in ketosis after a certain amount of time, your ketones are going to be circulating in your blood. They're not going to be coming out of the urine, and you're not going to get an accurate description if you're in ketosis or not. So I love the glucose ketone meter, and if you're, say, in the 80s for your glucose levels, but you're at 1.0, 1.5, 1.7 for your ketone levels, then that means you don't have a physiological need for food. Even though you may be thinking, oh my gosh, I'm hungry, I have this type of urge to eat something sugary or something that's going to give me energy, that's a psychological thing. Your body isn't used to processing those ketones, and it's going to take some time to adapt to it. And also you can use some nutrients like L-carnitine, sometimes you can use pantethine. Those are very important nutrients that help you combust or use your ketones as a fuel. But the main point of that, the number 2, is you didn't track. You didn't look at your, and then the other way I like you to track is what is your glucose load or your carb tolerance, meaning if you're eating a meal and your glucose goes above, say, 120, or goes up 30 points above and beyond what your fasting glucose is, or doesn't come back down to what your fasting glucose is in a good amount of time. So what's a good amount of time? Usually an hour is okay. 2 hours, not as good. 3 hours if it's not down to baseline. Even that ketogenic meal that you had or you thought you had created a glucose spike, which created a corresponding insulin spike, which is the kryptonite to ketones, and you're not getting into ketosis and ketones didn't work for you, and you didn't know that because you're like this and you're not measuring your glucose or your ketone levels. That's a huge, okay, I can end the video right there because I didn't do that. And so I tell people keto didn't work for you because mostly it's not your fault. No one's telling you this. You didn't know how to do it correctly. You didn't realize it's not one size fit all. You didn't track. And now we're going to talk about genetics. So what did genetics have to do with this? Well, it has a lot to do with it. I am one that has these genetic challenges. And it's not so much I'm a mutant or I have something growing out of the side of my neck. What it means is ultimately that your body has preferential ways of using fuel effectively based on your ancestry, based on your environment, based on your programmed DNA in terms of the way your ancestors ate their fuels and how they were able to effectively process them. And what I find is that there's a lot of fatty acid gene SNPs, which means you have some challenges with breaking down, absorbing, utilizing, and transferring those nutrients into ketones. And that's a huge thing. So what do you do about that? Well, you get a genetic test. We do something called the functional genomic analysis. We're starting to use DNA Fit, and it gives us really great ideas as to, hey, Mrs. Jones, guess what? Like me, like Dr. Joel, I have enzymes that have challenges being remade because of my DNA that don't allow me to be an effective ketogenic burner or user. And that means I have to do a modified, customized approach while I'm tracking and while I'm learning how to do it properly so that I can be in sort of a a metabolically flexible way of using glucose and ketones and proteins as my fuel source, but I don't go all in. I don't go into the deep end, but I'm in the shallow end and I'm using it effectively. It's curbing my sweet cravings. It's allowing me to have more energy and focus. It's allowing me to have some weight come off of the scale, but I'm doing it in a customized way. And really that requires a health professional to be able to help you in that aspect. Some of the gene SNPs that I see are ACAT enzyme SNPs, ACAT, PANK, FADS, and then there's some other soluble carriers that help you transport carnitine into the cell so that you can use that as a fuel source. It's a very complicated thing. The last thing, the probably most important thing that I find that keto didn't work for you is your stress. So when we're stressed out, it's COVID time, there's a lot of stress in the air, we're socially isolating, our income may be changing, our way of doing business is changing, being at home and having more interaction with our loved ones may be stressful. All of the above is going to create a cortisol spike. And that cortisol spike is going to cause a dumping of glucose into the bloodstream. And that glucose being dumped into the bloodstream is going to cause a corresponding insulin release. And that insulin release is going to be the kryptonite to keto. And then you go in there and you start eating healthy fats, which are okay, but not necessarily for you, or you're not doing it properly, or you didn't track and you didn't find out what was going on, and you already had a corresponding high glucose levels in your blood, but you didn't see, hey, am I producing ketones? So or stress is another way of we having stress is we have inflammation in the body. We have low-grade infections. We have low-grade immune challenges. That's going to cause a corresponding spike in insulin, which is going to cause a kryptonite decrease in ketones. And you're just not ready to do that. You have to put out the fires. You can't paint the walls or cut the grass before you've put out the fires if the burning building is on fire. So that's really important. You need to understand, okay, let's get a good complete blood test. Let's look at some of the challenges that I have with my stress response. Maybe we look at my adrenals. Maybe we do a genetic test. You have to do the work before you're able to do the work, if that makes sense. So the 4 reasons why it didn't work is perhaps you did it wrong, you didn't track, you didn't look at your genetics, you didn't do a pre-keto stress assessment, and that's why it didn't work. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. My name's Dr. Joel Rosen. I look forward to ending your keto didn't work nightmare. Take care.